Hey everybody, this video is sponsored by OKCoin Crypto Exchange. Why pay ridiculously high fees to Coinbase, Kraken, and Binance when you can use OKCoin, which has the lowest fees, guys? So if you want to save money on buying and selling and trading crypto, definitely have to use OKCoin. Sign up, link in the description. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Thinking Crypto channel. With me today is Mark Moss, who's a market analyst and one of my favorite YouTubers. Mark, great to be speaking with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited for it.
So Mark, as mentioned, I watch your content. I've learned a lot, finance, wealth, markets, crypto, all that good stuff. But I want to get to know you a bit better. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I'm from Southern California, so I have that deep in my veins. It's a very unique place in the world to live. And so, yeah, pretty much been there and kind of have that Southern California lifestyle. Currently, I'm living in Puerto Rico.
Oh, wow.
When the whole world locked down, California tried to really kind of see if they could be the leader between them and New York. And I decided to move out to Puerto Rico, give that a try. A little bit of a tax refugee. California has the highest taxes in the nation. And so a little bit of a tax refugee, thought we'd try something different. So currently from Southern California, currently living in Puerto Rico.
Are you liking it out there? And of course, I know the tax benefits are great.
You know, it's a very nuanced conversation. I would say overall, Puerto Rico is an awesome place. It's much better than I thought. The infrastructure is really good. Lots of money there. Very comfortable, beautiful. So overall, I'd say it's pretty good. Yeah.
Cool. So what did you do before you became a YouTuber, and what led you to become a YouTuber?
Well, I've been basically a full-time, professional investor / business owner, entrepreneur my whole career. I had only one job coming out of high school, and I quit that job, started a business, and I've never had another job. And so, I say investor, business owner, entrepreneur are kind of together. The lines between investor and business owner are very blurred. And at the end of the day, I think even most professional investors are still business owners. So Ray Dalio, for example, or Warren Buffett, one of the best known, most successful investors in history, but he's also a business owner, right? He owns Berkshire Hathaway. In the course of my career, I fixed and flipped almost 150 real estate homes. Wow. Was I a real estate investor? Or was that my business, right? I developed $25 million in real estate. Was I an investor? Or was I, right? So the lines get very blurred. I invest into businesses. I advise them. I help run them. I own them. So anyway, just been doing that basically my whole career. I started buying and selling real estate at 18 years old. I invested through the dot-com boom and bust, in the late 90s, which was when I was about 19, 20 years old. I've had multiple businesses in different sectors, 7 businesses that have reached 7 or 8 figures within 12 months. I'm kind of a growth hacker. I have a tech-focused Fortune 500 exit on a company that I've done. And so that's been most of my career. About in 2015, I got really into Bitcoin and started telling just kind of my close friends and family. And I started getting so many questions, and I was kind of answering the same questions over and over and over that I went ahead and started making a couple videos. And then people want to know, like, what else am I buying? So I started posting like my portfolio, and basically that turned into a newsletter. So I started writing a investment report, a cryptocurrency research newsletter in 2016, which I was writing and publishing, deep cryptocurrency research newsletter for 2016 to 2019. I sold that business to my partner. He bought me out. And then I still write a research investment newsletter today called the Tactical Asset Report. And it's built on my thesis of the 4-pillar blueprints of 4 ways to think about investing. So I still write that. That's kind of my job. I'm an investor, but I make money that way. And then, yeah, I do YouTube. I have a podcast, et cetera.
Very cool. You have a lot going on, but it seems like multiple streams of income and to help build your financial independence and a lot of experience as well. And like I've said at the beginning, I've learned a lot from your channel. So I appreciate your content and the fact that you're out there educating folks. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I have I feel like I was always kind of this like jack of all trades, master of none, so to speak, where I have a lot of width. I mean, I can cover a lot of topics. I have depth in several as well. But for me, like understanding my core values, like one, freedom is my highest value, which a lot of people say that's mine too, but not really. Like people want like dependency or consistency or safety or whatever. But then growth is one of those. And so like, I always need to be like growing. And so I've been in a lot of different things. And it's never been so useful as it is right now. Trying to make sense of what's going on in the world, in the markets, understanding, especially with Bitcoin, because in order to understand Bitcoin, you need to really know about 8 different subjects from, history, which I talk a lot about on my channel. So history, monetary history, what money is, technology, but also even into like philosophy, game theory, economics. And so, so really, all of my experience over my career has really like come together, and it's been pretty helpful for me right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even my own personal journey in crypto, having to learn about these other concepts I never thought about before. Like I didn't think about inflation before. I didn't think about monetary policy before. But now, the idea of what Bitcoin and crypto brings as far as a solution helps fix a lot of these things. So I have to ask, I know you got Bitcoin in your portfolio. Anything else you have in your crypto specific portfolio?
So, what's interesting is I, came in all in on Bitcoin, and the story, a little bit of a different story. And so like, you really kind of have to understand like the worldview and where you're coming from. But I grew up in in today's standards, kind of a non-traditional home. My parents are very kind of grassroots politics. Yeah, at the dinner table, we still talk politics today, even with my extended family. And I was always really involved in that. But after 2008 and getting kind of wiped out in that market and understanding really what's going on in Wall Street and the government, and then really going into the 2012 election process, I mean, I was just completely disillusioned with politics completely. And, while my grandfather was a World War II vet, my father's a Vietnam vet, I grew up thinking that I would probably go to war at one point. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad was in the military still, in the Air Force. But then I got to a point where like, man, I was so disillusioned with the whole system that I didn't, I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter. I have a pretty big arsenal, but like, I don't want to use that. I'd rather just be on a beach in Nicaragua and surf every day and fish and just kind of live that life. Sure. And I was just kind of over it, just kind of checked out. And in 2015, when I got into Bitcoin, I realized that we finally have a tool. We finally have something we can win with. And at that point, that's what I recognized Bitcoin for. And at that point, I said, I got to tell the whole world. I have to tell everybody. And that's when I started creating the content. I did then, like I said, in 2016, 18, 19, I started writing a cryptocurrency research newsletter. Over the course of 4 years, I wrote hundreds of reports that were, 20, 25 page reports, deep dives into each of these different projects. But in 2019, like I said, I had my partner buy me out of that. And the reason why is that the more research that I believe this to be true, I've heard hundreds of stories of this and it happened in my own life, but the more research that you do into both the problems that we're trying to solve and Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies, the more research that you do, the more you realize there's only one option. And so I think the way that I think about it is that there's a real war here, and this is not a joke. Like, and this is going to get a little bit serious and maybe a little bit of hyperbole, but like people think it will be. But like over the next couple of years, like this decade is the battle that basically sets humanity for eternity. I mean, forever, pretty much. And we either go into this totalitarian nightmare where basically with technology, with the passports they're trying to give us and CBDCs and facial recognition and all that can create like the perfect prison, or we win here, we dismantle the state and we have freedom forever. And there's only one tool to do that with. And so like for me, about 6 months ago, I decided at this point in my career, I've kind of achieved everything I need to achieve. I have kids, and I just figured at this point, I'm going to spend the rest of my career making sure that the Great Reset 2030 agenda does not happen. And so that's my fight. And I realize there's only one tool to do that. And so when you ask me what's in my portfolio, there's really only one thing in my portfolio. And that's why. I look at it, and again, I mean, I spent 4 years writing 20, 25 page reports on every single coin out there. A couple of things happened. One, I think the market changed a lot since 2016 to now, obviously. Sure. And so I have perspective of having invested through the .com boom and bust. Right. And I understand as a student of history how technology cycles work, and it's always the same way. And I'm coming in from a very ideological place. So anyway, that's a long answer for your short question. Sorry.
No, that's great. And it's great context. And oddly enough, I just interviewed Congressman Tom Emmer out of Minnesota. And one of the topics we discussed was CBDCs and how that will still maintain some of our rights, the Constitution, the right to privacy, right? And that is something he's fighting the good fight on. So these are real things happening and challenges that are up that we're facing, and we could lose some of our rights and freedom, to your point. So on the note of Bitcoin, you just struck a deal with iHeartRadio to broadcast or have a nationally syndicated radio show talking about Bitcoin and finance. How did that come about?
Well, it came about because they were big fans of my show, surprisingly. So, a couple of years ago, I was at a marketing convention, and the speaker on stage, Russell Brunson, he was showing his phone and his like DMs, and he had like these famous people he was talking to, and he was saying how, hey, look, this guy, here's our conversation, and they said, hey, Russell, I'm a big fan of what you're doing. And he's like, what? No way. Like, I'm a big fan of yours. And it was at that moment I realized, like, how could anybody ever be a big fan if you're not putting your content out into the world? Right. And so, a lot of what I'm doing now for the last couple of years is just putting content out into the world. It used to be just for my members and subscribers. Now I'm just putting out into the world. And so basically, like a lighthouse, you shine your message out, it brings the boats in. And so basically a guy named Joe Robinson, who's basically the head of the whole network itself, was a big fan, and he hunted me down. I wasn't easy to get a hold of, I guess. And, he just said, hey, I want you on the platform. We want you on the show. And he had to actually kick it down a couple levels to the people that kind of controlled that. And we just put a deal together. I was pretty easygoing. They offered me a deal and I just took it. I'm just looking for a way to kind of get my message out to a larger audience. Like I said, I want to kind of make the rest of my career about making sure their agenda doesn't come true. And so the more people that I can reach, the further I can get this message out, the better. Basically, I agreed to the deal. It was a little bit tough because, they had a lot of belief in me. They really liked me. Like I said, they were fans. That's why they sought me out. Rush Limbaugh, who was like, the old, probably the most famous guy on radio. He died, not too long ago. And they're like, hey, there's this hole, and who's going to fill that? And obviously there's people in the space right now trying to do that, but they said, we think you have potential. You could potentially rise to that role, and we're willing to help you, and we'll put marketing dollars behind you. And man, it was awesome. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And like I said, I just took the deal, and I wasn't even going to negotiate it. Let's just get this done. And then reality set in, and the reality was they said, well, okay, what we need is 5 1-hour episodes a week, which is what radio shows are. But I hadn't really thought through that.
Sure.
And I thought, wait a minute, freedom is my number one value. And if I have to work 5 days a week on, forever, like that violates my number one value. I can't do it. And I just can't do it. Sorry. Like, it's not going to work for me. So unfortunately, I kind of started falling apart. And then basically we kind of kept talking, and I'm launching a weekend show. So it's going to be 3 hours on the weekend. And that way I have the freedom of my life. I could pre-record it if I need to, if I'm traveling or whatever. And that gives me the freedom and flexibility, as a lifelong, business owner, investor, entrepreneur. What happens is a lot of people, they figure out what their careers are going to be, or somehow they get into their career. And with whatever time they have left, they try to build like a little bit of a lifestyle around it. What I did was the opposite. So I again, growing up in Southern California, I go to Baja, Mexico once a month, and I ride dirt bikes, and I go surfing, and I go out to the desert, and I go snowboarding all winter. And what I did is I built my lifestyle first. And then I managed to build a career that allowed me to keep the lifestyle that I wanted.
Sure.
And so, oh, shoot, a big swell's coming up. Boom, I'm on a plane. I'm heading down to El Salvador. Oh, snow's falling in Utah. Boom, I'm on a plane. And I do it all the time. I mean, in just the last 2 weeks, I've been in, I spent 5 days in El Salvador. I spent 4 days in Baja, California. Next week, I'm going to Arizona. And I do that. And so I need to be able to continue that lifestyle for me. So anyway, we were able to come out with a pretty good happy medium with iHeartRadio. And it's launching October 2nd. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. When I saw the news right away, I'm like, I got to talk to Mark. This is pretty groundbreaking for the crypto market specifically. Obviously, there's other financial shows and things like that, but you're going to be the first nationally syndicated to essentially talk about Bitcoin and crypto, correct?
Yeah. They, my content is pretty wide. The approach that I take on my channel is, instead of trying to tell you what it is and how it works, there's how a wallet works and what a node is and how you do yield farming or whatever. There's plenty of channels that do that. I talk about why. Why do we even need it? Why do we even care? And so I talk about the problems. And so because of that, I might talk about central bank policy, or I might talk about inflation, or I might talk about how BlackRock's buying up all the residential homes in America. And I talk about these problems, and that is why we need this. So my content gets pretty wide, but yeah, they actually asked me if I could kind of get a little more narrow to just talk about, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And so there's definitely an appetite for it, and we're going to bring it.
That's amazing. And I don't know if you know the statistics yet, but do you know what the reach might potentially be?
I don't know.
It's probably,
it's the way they do it. I mean, I'm not a radio pro, so I'm learning about it, but it's a nationally syndicated radio show. So a lot of the stations around the country are independent stations, right? So that's the syndication part. So they need to see how many stations actually pick up the show. A lot of stations they control, but some of them they don't control. And so I went in, the announcement was me in the studio recording the promo. And so the promo is going out to all the stations now to try to get the stations to pick it up. But I guess in the last week, the response has been overwhelming. They said the response has been amazing. So it looks like it's going to get a massive distribution, a lot of pickup. I don't know what the numbers will be. We'll figure it out. Give me a couple months.
For sure. And what would be pretty cool is, as the market, we're going to talk about the market, of course, in Bitcoin, but potentially things could be headed north, price wise, adoption wise this year. And maybe that, your launch of your show dovetails with that. And I think a lot of people definitely want to listen in to learn and to your point, answering the so what question or the why question, right?
I hope so. I mean, there's really no doubt in my mind that the market's going to continue to grow and go up. Over what time frame? That's always the question, Sure. But I'm not looking at this in months. I'm looking at this in decades, and so for sure it's going to go up, and we're going to ride it all the way up.
As far as your content topics, and are you planning to have maybe interview folks as well, kind of similar to your YouTube channel or podcast?
Yeah, so I have full creative control over the show. And I need to kind of figure out what that format is going to be, because it's going to be a 3-hour show. It's a lot of time to fill up. I think I'm going to kind of break it into 3 segments. And so I'm probably going to do a cover of the news, the news topics. So that might be, talking about the infrastructure bill that just got negotiated, or the hack that happened. Right. So it'll probably cover kind of the news to keep it current, on a weekly basis. I'll probably have a few people on that will discuss the news, get some different viewpoints, have some discussion around it. And then the third hour will probably be an interview with somebody. So that's kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to launch with right now. And then we'll just kind of play with it and see what makes sense.
Very cool. I am excited to see that go live. And maybe it'll go to TV after. So
yeah, maybe. I mean, I already reach a couple million people a month as it is. So it's I don't really need them. I don't really need iHeartRadio either. Yeah. And to me, I mean, who even listens to the radio anymore?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I haven't listened to the radio in forever.
Right.
But apparently people do. Apparently, it's still the biggest medium that people are taking content right now. So I might not listen, but lots of people do.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny how things have changed, but yet radio is still very strong. I guess because people are stuck in their cars, right? And they listen to what they like in their car ride. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the crypto market. Yeah, I know you're looking at this macro level over the years, but specifically this year, because we are in a bull cycle, are you expecting growth price wise, and do you have a price prediction for Bitcoin?
Well, so as I already said, right, of course, I expect it to continue to grow.
Sure.
And that's, for a number of reasons. So if we look at it from like a kind of a short-term, like macro perspective, we can see that, the Federal Reserve is basically, and not just Federal Reserve, but all the central banks around the world are basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that is that if they keep printing, they're destroying the currencies. We're seeing massive inflation. And so that's bad. But if they stop printing, then the whole market falls apart. Even when they talk about even thinking about maybe slowing down, the market starts falling apart. And so they're really stuck in this rock and the hard place. And the reality is, well, in my opinion, the reality is that there's just absolutely no way they can do that. And I say that pretty matter of factly because we can see that, from 2008 from 2008 to 2018, I mean, that's when really QE started, and they started pumping in trillions of dollars into the market. When the current Fed chair Jerome Powell took over in 2018, he tried to kind of come in and fix things, and he started kind of tapering back a little bit, and then the market crashed hard, and they had to kind of go right back into it again. So we know that they've been unsuccessful in the past. We can see even just in the last 6 weeks, even talking about maybe doing it is causing the markets to pull back.
Yeah.
And then we can look at things like the GDP numbers came out, I think 2 weeks ago, and they were bad. They were 25% off of their projections, which is not good. Job growth numbers are slow. In order to make up the gap that we lost last year, we're going to have to average like a 3.5% GDP growth rate over the next 6 quarters, next year and a half, which is going to be impossible to do unless they continue to just pump money out. And so I think they're going to continue to do that. I mean, we just saw this $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill go through Monday, and now they're already got a basic approval for another $3.5 trillion. So what happens is every time they print a dollar, they inflate the money supply, right? Inflating the money supply. We have more dollars chasing the same amount of goods and services. Right. And so if you pay attention to economics, it sounds very confusing, but it's always really simple. Right. Supply and demand. That's it. It's that easy. And so when you increase the demand, right, you increase more dollars, you inflate the money supply, there's more money, more chasing the same amount of goods and services. Prices go up. Now, in this case, we have even less goods and services because supply chain restraints, et cetera. About 35% of all the dollars in existence today were created in about the last year and a half. And so you increase the money supply by 35%, you see prices go up by 35%. And so I think I tweeted a couple of days ago, and I said, basically Bitcoin's price to the upside is infinite because the dollar's infinite to the downside.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, and this is a little bit of a deviation from the topic, but you and I guess we're both in America, right? So we're thinking about things in US dollars, and Bitcoin as of right now is $44,300. But if you only look at things priced in dollars, you're not getting an accurate picture of things. So when inflation happens, or even hyperinflation, the dollar becomes worth less and less and less. So people think my home has never been worth so much. Well, no, that's not really the truth. Right. The dollar's lost so much value, it takes more dollars to buy those things, right? And so like in Zimbabwe, we have like $100 trillion note. So Bitcoin could be worth $100 trillion. US dollars. That just means the US dollar is worth nothing, right? And so you kind of have to think about things a little bit differently. Think about things in terms of like purchasing power. But anyway, they're going to keep pumping in trillions and trillions of dollars. And I believe that's going to continue to push all asset prices up, commodities. So as they continue to increase massive inflation, print unlimited amounts of fake fiat currency, the hard, real, tangible things, the commodities, I think will continue to do really good. And that's, oil, that, energy, oil, uranium, that's gold, silver, precious metals, et cetera. And stocks, of course, all three indexes are at all-time highs, real estate, and of course, cryptocurrency as well. So I think the upside is unlimited. As far as like a price prediction, I mean, if you're trying to ask me for a price prediction of this year, I typically try not to think about things in that short of timeframes. For me, I'm like really a trend investor. So I think more in like longer term trends. I would say that I think we break previous all-time high this year. I would say that we should be able to get back over 100,000 this year. Of course, there's a couple things to watch out for. Really, specifically, we need to keep our eyes on the bond market and the stock market. If we see another crash this year, like we did in March of 2020, well, then that kind of analysis goes off the table. I would guess that we don't see that. I think the Fed continues to pump in as much stimulus as we need. We don't get a crash, and I think Bitcoin gets back to its all-time high and maybe to 100,000 this year. If I look longer term, which is where I like to look, then let's call it 5 years. I mean, I think Bitcoin could be 500,000 by then. And the way that you would do it, if being an investor, and I've invested in a lot of like private early round deals, you're invested into like new, and specifically in new technologies. You're investing into a new technology, like let's say Uber. And when Uber got pitched in Silicon Valley, it got passed up by lots and lots of people. They didn't want it. They didn't know what it was. They'd never heard of it before. Today, it seems, of course, like it's so simple. Right. Back then, they didn't understand what it was. And so, they're saying, oh, it's going to be worth $100 billion. And they're like, we don't even know what it is. Like, where do you come up with that valuation? And it's simple, right? If we take this much from the taxi industry, and this much from the limo industry, and this much from the rideshare industry, and this much from the van industry, if we could take 5% from each, we could have that value, right? And so with Bitcoin, it's very simple, right? It's like JP Morgan, Citibank already have put in their guidance. They think it'll overtake gold. Well, that's 13 trillion right there. So that's a 13x from here, just on gold alone. They call it a Swiss bank account in your pocket. It's a way to hold wealth that can't be confiscated or stolen or censored. We can see today that Swiss bank accounts are being seized all the time. Russian oligarchs are losing $500 million at a time. So it's definitely a better form of offshore banking. Well, the offshore banking has about 30 to 40 trillion sitting in it.
Right.
Well, it's about half the bonds in the world right now are negative yielding. So it's better than holding a negative yielding bond. Well, there's another, 10, 15, it's probably about almost 20 trillion now. So another 20 trillion. And so now we're up to, 80, $100 trillion. Trillion. So it's not hard to imagine it can get a couple percent off of each one of those categories.
Absolutely. And we're seeing companies, corporates, adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. Even certain countries like El Salvador are looking to make it a legal tender. Do you think that trend will continue? We're going to see more companies to fight inflation, to use Bitcoin as a hedge, and just countries around the globe adding it as a legal tender as well?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. The one thing that a lot of people have where they get it wrong is that they don't understand it's like an evolution. So just because something isn't that thing today doesn't mean that it won't ever be. And so if you and I were looking at like a giant oak tree that I just planted and it's, just budding out of the ground, and we could look at that tree and go, oh, that thing will never be a big tree. There's no way I'll ever be able to build a tree house in that thing. Like, right. And that could be true. I mean, it's a small tree. Lots of things could happen. It could die, but we know that it has everything it needs to grow into that tree. Right. And Bitcoin is the same way. So there's this evolution. And so the way that money kind of evolves is typically it starts as a collectible. And then as enough people collect it, there's enough money there, then it becomes a store of value. And then after enough people use it as a store of value, eventually it can turn into a medium of exchange. And then after everybody's using it as a medium of exchange, eventually then it can evolve into a unit of account. And so the big critique today is, Bitcoin will never be a medium of exchange. Well, just because it's not the best medium of exchange today, it doesn't mean it won't ever be that. Sure. So we're already seeing it. We've already seen it go from the collectible to the store of value stage. And so to your point, we've seen lots of institutions, hedge funds, S&P 500 companies use it as a store of value now. So they're moving their reserves into Bitcoin. MicroStrategy, of course, is kind of leading the way with that. So it's already made the jump into store of value, and of course now even the Fed is calling it a store of value. So it's taken over that role. For a lot of people listening that think it's too volatile to be a store of value, I would just ask you just to adjust your time frame. And so, for example, with real estate, I mentioned I've been a real estate investor for most of my career. Typically, you'd say don't buy a house unless you plan to hold it for at least 5 years.
Sure.
Because that's kind of like that cycle. Well, there's never been a 3-year cycle where Bitcoin's ever been down. So then with Bitcoin, don't buy it unless you plan to hold it for at least 3 years, right? If you look at the lowest price every year since its inception, it's been higher every year except for 1 year. Only in 2015 was the lowest point lower. So it's trended up. And it's averaged a 200% compounded annual growth rate. And so it's been an amazing store value. And yes, it hit 65,000. It pulled back and it's sitting at 44,000 today. So if you bought it 3 months ago, at the peak, you're down a little bit of money, but it's up over 300% in 12 months. And so again, just adjust your time frame on that,
Yeah, that's a great point.
Then I guess the last piece was then, can it make the jump to the medium of exchange? Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned El Salvador. And so El Salvador is a really interesting thing that's going on down there. I was recently just down there. I think I just said that earlier. I just spent 5 days down there, I think 2 weeks ago. And basically what happened there is a local community got formed called Bitcoin Beach. A guy named Michael Peterson that's actually from my hometown here in Southern California has been going down there for like 15 years. And he started a Bitcoin circular economy. So he got some stores to take it and he got some people to use it as a medium of exchange. So they started as a medium of exchange. And then they've been layering on education and training and all kinds of like community things on top of that. And it's done so well, it's done so amazing that the government took notice and said, what the heck is going on? Oh, it's because of Bitcoin. Well, let's adopt it for the whole country. And they're going straight to the medium of exchange use case. And I think a little high level of this is useful to understand. So basically, the way it works is the law got passed about 6 weeks ago. It goes into effect next month. And everybody is supposed to, all the merchants need to allow people to pay in Bitcoin.
Right.
One piece that's missed out of that is it doesn't mean the merchant has to receive Bitcoin. It doesn't mean they have to store Bitcoin. They just have to allow the person to pay in Bitcoin. So it can instantly be converted to dollars. So it's not like anybody's being forced to hold or use Bitcoin. They're forced to allow someone to spend it, but it can be converted instantly. So that's number one. But what a lot of people don't understand, and this goes back to like studying cryptocurrency for so long, and then seeing the technology evolve, is that technology scales in layers. And so Bitcoin has a layer 2, and now there's even layer 3s being built. And on layer 2, so we have Lightning, we have Liquid, we have RSK, we have things like that. On Lightning, you can already transact Bitcoin faster, cheaper, and more private than the 8,000 other cryptocurrencies that are out there. So all those ones that say they're faster, cheaper, and more private than Bitcoin, well, not really. Because if we do it on layer 2. And so what's happening down in El Salvador and Bitcoin Beach is they all use Lightning. And I was down there and I personally did it. And so basically you go to the place, I want to order a coffee. They punch it out on their little point of sale system. They spin the little thing around just like they do in the United States. It puts a QR code in my Bitcoin wallet. On my Lightning wallet, I scan the QR code. It pulls up the amount. I hit send and instant. It's there, and it sends it for about 1 sat. So $1 is divisible into 100 cents. A Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million sats. And so I can send that transaction for 1 sat, which is 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. It's about I don't know what the calculation is today, 1/2000th of a penny.
Right. That's pretty cool. And I'm glad that you were able to experience that, because I think there's still
some people will call FUD, right? That, oh, it's not going to work. They're not going to do this. They don't have the infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of people now have smartphones, and it seems they have the technology to be able, and the government is assisting them.
I would argue even the other way on that, right? So let me give you a better example. So first off, solutions come to problems. That's the way it's supposed to work, right? Someone sees a problem, they come up with a solution. I say it's supposed to work like that because today we have all this money being created and it's trying to like find problems that don't need to be solved. But problems come to solutions. And so if you're only in the United States or Europe or in Canada, like a developed nation, you don't maybe fully understand the needs that are in the rest of the world. Sure. And so in El Salvador specifically, let's just talk about that. In El Salvador specifically, about 30% of their GDP, their national gross domestic product, comes from remittances, people that have left El Salvador and send money back, right? Right. Now, if I'm in California and I want to send money to somebody in El Salvador, and I have to use like Western Union, for example, so this is probably the number one money transmitter, I would have to get in my car and drive to the bank. So whatever that's going to be 20 minutes. I have to wait in line. I have to withdraw cash. Then I got to drive to the grocery store, get in line at the Western Union, give them the cash, fill out the forms. Then I have to drive home. So I don't know what that's an hour out of my day, hour and a half out of my day, big hassle. Now I understand that's the last time I sent Western Union. I understand now there's like an app that hooks to a bank. I haven't tried that yet. But then on the receiving end, that person like in Bitcoin Beach, they have to get on a bus and they have to take a 2-hour bus to the city. Wow. And now they take a 2-hour bus ride to the city, they get the cash, and they have to take a two-hour bus ride back with cash, maybe get robbed. Yeah. And then the fees can be anywhere from 20 to 30% of the amount of money they sent. So that's a big problem. It's a problem for me as a sender. It's a problem for the receiver. It puts them at risk. It's inconvenient. And they get eaten up in fees. Now, today, I can send them money in 1 second for 1 sat, and they can receive it right on their phone. I don't have to go to the bank. They don't have to get on a bus. There's no security problems. They have the money instantly and for almost free. That's a big solution to a big problem. And it goes even deeper than that. So in El Salvador, just like in the United States, you have to pay to open up a bank account. Now, and if you open a bank account in the US, there's, if you keep certain limit, or certain limits, they maybe waive the fees, et cetera. Well, the people down there can't meet those limits. And so they don't really have that. So it typically costs about $25 to $50 a month to have a bank account. But that could be half of a month's pay. So guess what? They don't have bank accounts. How are they going to pay that much to have a bank account? So they don't. Right. So without a bank account, how can they send and receive and store money? Yeah, they can't. And as a merchant, in order to have a store, a little bodega, a little pupusa stand, whatever, I would like to receive credit cards, and I would like people to be able to pay me. Well, I mean, unless you're doing, $15,000, $20,000 a month of business, you can't get one. So the stores can't get into the financial system to receive money, and the people can't get a bank account to send and receive money. They're completely out of the whole financial system. Right. Bitcoin fixed that. So now that merchant can receive Bitcoin. The users can send and receive Bitcoin from their wallets. They can receive remittances, they can spend it, and that whole problem has been solved because of Bitcoin. And so I get it if you're in the United States and you go to the bar and you pay $20 for a drink and you think there's no such thing as a problem, but they got real problems down there. They got real problems, yeah. They got real problems, and it solved it. It's a massive, massive solution for them.
That's awesome. And I'm looking forward. I believe it goes into effect in September, I believe, the law. So I'm excited to see how things grow there. But that's awesome. That solution's been presented to these folks who are unbanked or underbanked. And they now have a real solution. Another item I want to ask you about and get your thoughts, Bitcoin ETF. You think we're likely to see one get approved this year? I know Gary Gensler, the SEC, they're talking about Bitcoin futures ETF, but any thoughts on that front?
This year, well, first I would say, yeah, I think we'll see one for sure. Will it go through this year? I would say there's a pretty good chance we see one this year. I think, like I said, for sure we see one. If not, this year, then next year. I think there's probably a pretty good chance that we see one this year. Gensler is pretty pro Bitcoin and crypto, and he kind of gets that pretty well. There's a ton of very reputable companies that have put together, ETF submission packages to get it through. So I think there's probably a pretty good chance we see one this year, if not for sure next year. I'm not a big fan of it. I would be okay if we never saw one. I'd probably prefer if we didn't ever see one. But either way, I think it's coming. Yeah. Wall Street wants to financialize everything. That's what they do.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask, your reasons is because of how historically gold ETF and we've seen what has happened after the ETFs, even though there's a spike price wise, but long term, it sounds like as far as your perspective.
Well, I mean, for a couple of reasons. So first, right off the bat, as I said, Wall Street can get really complicated, but the reality is everything breaks down to supply and demand. So if we look at Bitcoin's price, it's supply and demand, right? So we have more people that want it than there is available. The price goes up. What happens with ETFs is it changes the supply demand characteristics. And so now you referenced gold, for example. In the gold market, there's about 500 paper ounces for every one real physical ounce. So see, Bitcoin has a fixed supply, 21 million, right? There will never be more than 21 million. But what if I create 500 million paper Bitcoins? And what happens is then Wall Street is now speculating on these paper Bitcoins that aren't even real. And so then it detaches completely from reality, and it's a completely gamed financial market. And so then they'll use that, just like we see in gold and silver, to manipulate the market. So gold crashed really hard on Sunday, and there was like $4 billion of paper gold contracts that were dumped into the market at closing hours when there was no liquidity in the market. $4 billion of paper got dumped in the market by who? And so that's the type of thing. And I don't think we need that in Bitcoin. If for example, they could all be physically settled, meaning they weren't cash settled, that would be better. And I've seen some proposals of some ETFs that are physically settled. And so, that would be better because then people are actually buying and selling physical Bitcoin. My fear would be that that's kind of like a slippery slope, right? They start with that and then they go to the cash settled. So overall, I'm not a fan of it. I'd prefer to see that go away because I think, like I said, the manipulation. And overall, I think eventually Bitcoin gets rid of the need to have a lot of the Wall Street stuff that's there.
Sure.
So eventually it's not needed at all.
Yeah, I guess that's why Gensler is leading towards, he said, Bitcoin futures ETF versus like the physically settled. Probably his Goldman Sachs background is playing out here. I want to ask you about crypto regulations, and we saw the infrastructure bill with these, I guess, backwards thinking regulations got put into there, and then one gentleman out of Alabama was the catalyst to not have the amendment go through. What are your thoughts on that entire situation?
Yeah. So a couple things that I would think off right off the bat. So first off, I think, where do I dig in? I think, so real quickly, I mean, they're putting an infrastructure bill together, right? They're $1.2 trillion, and infrastructure is supposed to be roads, bridges, et cetera. What happens is most of the time, they get little things through they'd like to get through that they can't normally get through. They stuff them into a bill like this. Right. On this particular bill, what happened is that they need to come up with a way to pay for that 1.2 trillion. And so the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, said that, well, shoot, if we tighten regulations on crypto, basically what they're saying is like close the loops. We think there's a lot of taxes that are being avoided. If we close those loops and we collect the tax we should be receiving, we could pick up $28 billion. And so they're trying to find ways to pay for that infrastructure bill. So it got shoved in there like that. I don't know where they came up with that $28 billion. I think it's a ludicrous amount of money. And ultimately what happens is if they regulate it, which we can dig into a little bit, but the way that they want to regulate it, propose to regulate it is theoretically impossible. You can't comply with that. So basically they use the term broker too broadly. And so basically even a piece of software that would affect a change, a transfer, would be deemed a broker. which it's not, of course. And then what they want is they want that to capture information on both sides. So like a miner, for example, that's just helping the network process transactions, or a node should now capture the buyer and seller's information on every single so it's theoretically impossible to comply with that. So what it would do is most likely nobody's going to want to develop software or be involved in that industry in the United States. Has nothing to do with the rest of the world, only the United States. And so then it goes offshore. And so while they were hoping to gain 28 billion, they'll probably end up losing 20 billion because all that tech and industry moves offshore. And so I think that's what's going to happen. I think as the battle wore on, it was pretty cool to see, in a sense, where it really woke up the cryptocurrency space, both from a company, the companies involved, the regulators, the senators, et cetera, people in Congress, but even the users really mobilized, flooded them with phone calls and emails, things like that. And I think while it's bad right now, so basically a couple senators put one set of amendments in, couple senators put different amendments in. And I'm going to just say right now, on both sides of the amendment, they were both Republicans and Democrats. This is not really about, I think people need to kind of look past like this is Republicans versus Democrats. It's really we, the people, versus the government. And so you could see on both sides of those amendments, it was Republicans and Democrats there. I think, there was enough pressure put on that it really slowed this down. I think Ted Cruz was the big hero here. And a lot of people may not like Ted Cruz, but put your biases aside and just look at the merits of what he said. And he basically came out and said that, look, this is no way to do politics. You don't cram something so important through in 3 days without serious deliberation. And he said basically, if there's more than 5 people here that can explain what cryptocurrencies and DeFi are, then maybe we'll go ahead with it. Of course, nobody could. So he's like, look, this needs to have long, thought out, careful debate. We need experts on both sides. This has to be something seriously thought of. So he said, let's just strike the whole thing. But anyway, it didn't get struck out. It went ahead and got passed. It doesn't go in. So for one, it got passed with the broad definition of what a broker is, which is bad. They're saying verbally that, but it doesn't really include nodes and miners. We're not going to deal with that. And they're saying that, but it did leave it too broad. It doesn't go into place till 2023. So we still have 2 years to still go back and amend it and withdraw it if need be. So I'd say it's bad as is. It's not as bad because they say it's not as bad. It's also not as bad because we have a couple years to try to fix it.
Sure.
I would say it's net good, though, because it really woke people up to how screwed up politics is. It really showed Wall Street, or I should say politics, how big crypto is.
Yep.
And if they want to win their next election, they should probably think about that. But even bigger, I think overall, it showed that they don't want to kill it. They don't want to kill Bitcoin. They don't want to kill cryptocurrencies. They just want to get some tax out of it. I think this kind of shows that they've accepted that it's here to stay.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big deal. So a lot of things there. I think overall it's not as bad. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now already today, I think 4 Democrats have written support to Pelosi to pull those amendments out. Mm-hmm. So it's not dead, and it's going to be fought over. I think in the end it's going to win. Now I will say, just in final closing, and then we can dig into this if you want. This is what Bitcoin was built for. Mm. This is what Bitcoin was built for. This doesn't affect Bitcoin really. I would say again, from my pro-freedom stance, that revolutions don't ask for permission. Mm. You didn't, and I tweeted this. I said, you didn't think they were just going to give up the money printer easily, did you?
Right.
So, like we always knew it was going to be a battle. This is what Bitcoin was built for. It has to be done without permission, not with their permission. It's kind of funny to see the decentralized crypto industry going and trying to get permission from the government to please let us take the money away from you. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, it's true. And there was talks of Janet Yellen, of course, of the Treasury, lobbying some of these different folks to stop those amendments. So to your point, they're not going to give it up that easily, right? So I know we're a bit short on time here, so I want to ask you a couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. Any tips for any YouTubers starting that you may have, or entrepreneurs? Any tips that you can share?
Yeah, I can share some tips. So first thing I would say is that it starts out fun and it starts out as a hobby, and eventually it gets kind of old and it gets tiresome, and it turns into a job. So do it over something that you love and you're super interested in. So that old cliche of if you love what you do, you'll never work. It's kind of somewhat true, because in order to be really good at something, you have to put a lot of time into it. And so you should love it and it shouldn't seem like work. Obviously, after doing this for a couple of years, there's times where it's work. I'm like, oh man, I got to get a couple more videos out. Yeah. But I'm doing it in a niche that I've already spent most of my career glued to. I look at all of it anyway. And so for me to commentate on it is easy, because even if I quit doing my YouTube, I'd still be reading the same things.
Sure.
So one, pick the right niche that you love. Two, what I would say is, for me, and my whole career is built off of this, and my YouTube channel is built off this as well, is like, my whole thing is servant first. I'm always trying to serve other people. I believe if I help other people get what they want, I get what I want. So every time I've put out a piece of content on YouTube, I think, will this provide value to the people? I don't do stuff just because I want to do it. I don't just jump on it. I don't have vlogs of what I'm eating for lunch. Like, I want everything to be provide value. The other thing is consistency. So if you're going to do once a month, do once a month. If you can do 3 times a week, do 3 times a week, but make it consistent. So it should be the same day, same time, etc. And again, it could be once a month. It could be 3 times. It could be once a day, but make it consistent. The other thing is that if I was just starting out again, what I would do, or what you should do, would be to use search engine traffic to figure out what people are actually looking for. Sure. And so there's tools you could use, like TubeBuddy, for example, and it can help you see what people are searching for. And then you can make topics on what people are already searching for. Now, getting millions of views and 300,000 subscribers, I don't have to worry about that anymore. But I would, if I was starting out, I would do that again. The other thing is that you really want to watch for 2 main metrics. And so if I was running pay-per-click on Google or Facebook ads, it's no different. It's click-through rate and it's watch time. So on pay-per-click or Facebook ads, it'd be bounce rate. But they want to see, if I serve this ad up, if I serve this video up to people, will they click on it?
Right.
And then on Google pay-per-click or Facebook ads, if they click on it and they go to the landing page, do they stay there and read it, or do they bounce off? YouTube would be, how long do they watch that piece of content for? So with YouTube, it'd be click-through and watch time. The click-through rate needs to be over 4%. Typically, the first couple of days, I'll get 10, 12%, and then it kind of trickles down into that 4% range. If you're not getting that with your click-through rate, you need to figure that out, and that would be typically from the title and the thumbnail, and then the watch time. And so I think the more watch time, the better. And so if you have a 2-minute video with 100% watch time, I have a 30-minute video with 50% watch time, I have way more watch time than you.
Sure.
I think 10 minutes is 8 minutes now is actually the sweet spot. They like 8 minutes because they can put an ad in the middle of that.
Sure.
So I would try to go at least 8 minutes and try to get at least 50% watch time on that. If you're not getting 50% watch time, you need to go figure that out. That's like copywriting techniques. Am I giving people what they want? Am I hooking them to stay till the end? Things like that. So, and then I guess the last piece of advice I'd give would be, don't upload the video at the last minute before it goes live. Try to upload your videos at least 24 hours in advance, if not 3 days in advance, because YouTube transcribes the video and figures out where to place it in the algorithm based off of that. And then the first 24 hours in the algorithm is the most important. And so that kind of sets the stage for how it goes from there. So when a video goes live, put all your firepower behind it, which means, send out an email blast or promote it on social media, engage with the audience, etc.
Great tips. And Mark, I want to Yeah, no, that's and some of it I've employed, some I'm learning today. So I'm always learning something when I listen to you. So final set of questions here, rapid fire. What's your favorite food?
Well, I guess I have to say tacos. Tacos. I probably eat more tacos than anything else.
Can't go wrong with tacos. Favorite musician or band?
Last several years, it's mostly just been podcasts and YouTube videos. The band that's getting the most play right now is a band from California called Revolution. Mm-hmm. And I was just at their concert last week, so it's probably my favorite band at the moment.
Nice. Favorite movie?
Shoot, man. I used to love movies. I feel like every movie today is like propaganda, and I have like a hard time watching movies today. If I was going to say favorite movie, it would probably be a comedy movie, because the comedies I can watch like 100 times. So some of those ones I've watched a couple hundred times would probably be Zoolander, Old School. Those might be my favorite movies.
Cool. Favorite book?
Shoot, so many good books. I would say probably the two most, I know you're just looking for one. Probably the two most influential books on my life early in my career were both Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich.
Very cool.
So maybe two books I would say that really set my life in a direction to be like kind of like a lifelong learner. So I would say those two books. I would say, if you want more, I would say two really important books everyone should read would be The Road to Serfdom, which tells you the history and how we got here and how things need to be to work. And then The Sovereign Individual, which kind of tells you the future. So those two books would be really good to understanding where we're at and where we're going.
Sure. And I have this final question here as far as hobby, but I know you mentioned surfing but when you're not doing YouTube and things like that, what's your favorite pastime?
Well, I told you I built my career around my lifestyle so I could do it. So very unique being in Southern California. I have, I guess if I had to choose one, it's probably surfing. That's the one I do every day. I probably would choose motocross over surfing because I like it better. I just don't do it on a daily basis. And then snowboarding. So those three.
Very cool. Mark, pleasure chatting with you. And like I said, I'm always learning from you. So thank you for joining me today. And I appreciate all the information you provided.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a fun combo.
And certainly looking forward to your radio show in October. So
yeah,
that's
man.
going to be cool.